Red Bull leaves day one of preseason testing with more questions than answers, and a whole lot of head scratching. The first day of preseason testing is in the books, and let's just say Red Bull isn't exactly radiating that same untouchable aura we've gotten used to. Usually, by this point, they're already flexing a full second ahead of the competition, making the rest of the grid look like they're driving in slow motion. But this time, not so much. With Liam Lawson stepping into a new role in a car that, let's be honest, looks suspiciously like last year's RB20 with a fresh coat of paint, there's a growing concern. Can the Austrian squad still deliver the rocket ship that Volkerstappen needs to dominate once again? And even juicier, could the Dutchman start eyeballing the exit door before the season even properly kicks off? The numbers from day one don't scream disaster, but they don't exactly scream unstoppable dominance either. Lawson clocked in 58 laps, setting a best time of 1 minute and 31.560 seconds, which put him in a respectable but not exactly mind-blowing 8th place. Meanwhile, Stappen logged 74 laps, securing the third fastest time of the day. Not bad, right? Except here's the kicker. Red Bull's usual preseason move is to show up, lay down a lap time that makes the competition contemplate early retirement, and then go grab a celebratory Red Bull or something stronger. That didn't happen this time. And now, the big question. What the hell is going on with the RB21? At first glance, it looks eerily similar to last year's car, almost like Red Bull photocopied their 2024 machine, changed the date and the file name, and called it a day. Sure, there are probably some sneaky upgrades hidden in the shadows, but the overall vibe? Déjà vu. Of course, there are still plenty of unknowns. Some of the car's crucial elements, like the underfloor, a notorious weak spot during their 2024 mid-season development battles, haven't been fully dissected yet. But one thing is clear. Both drivers weren't exactly dancing with the RB21 like it was love at first sight. And speaking of doubts, Max Fon, who, let's be real, probably knows more about that car than some of the engineers, hasn't been shy about addressing them. When asked whether Red Bull had actually made a step forward with the RB21, the four-time world champ gave a very Max answer. We know where last year's car had issues, so it's crucial to see if we've actually made progress over the next few days. We don't have a lot of time before the first race, so we need to rack up the miles, gather data, and figure out where the hell we're losing time. Right now, I have no season goals, because I have no idea how competitive we are. Translation: this car better be fast, or I might just start looking at other options. So, while it's way too early to press the panic button, one thing is certain: this isn't the cakewalk Red Bull was expecting. Whether they find their missing pace over the next few days or spend the season playing defense is the real question. Either way, the grid is watching, and probably grinning a little. Red Bull's preseason test day 1. A bumpy ride, frustrated faces, and some serious headaches. Both Verstappen and Lawson spent what felt like an eternity wrestling with the car's balance, desperately trying to tame the beast before finally getting a somewhat decent grip on it. And let's be real, preseason testing, especially on day 1, is mostly about figuring out whether the car actually behaves like the team thought it would after months of tweaking and perfecting it in the simulator. But here's the kicker: it didn't. And honestly, it's a little painful to watch how Verstappen is being treated here. The guy literally dragged last year's third fastest car to a championship victory, yet you wouldn't know it from the way things are unfolding. We don't want to jump the gun and start screaming crisis just yet. After all, it's only been one day. But let's just say that the RB21 isn't exactly inspiring confidence right now. Red Bull is probably hoping to wipe this day from their memory as quickly as possible. They ended up with the 3rd and 8th fastest times, which, under normal circumstances, wouldn't be a total disaster. But here's the thing: there was zero celebration, no smug grins, no triumphant fist bumps in the Red Bull garage. And when a team that usually walks around with big dick energy after testing suddenly looks like they're trying to avoid eye contact with the cameras, you know something's off. This all suggests that they're not sandbagging, no we're hiding our true pace bullshit here. And worse, they might have actually lost more performance than they were comfortable admitting. Word on the paddock is that the RB21 isn't exactly a revolution. It's more like a low-budget sequel to the RB20, particularly the original Bahrain spec version from last year. And if that wasn't concerning enough, Hero just confirmed that this is the car they're bringing to Melbourne. Meaning, if they don't squeeze every last drop of performance out of this thing in the next 2 days, they're royally screwed. And poor Lawson? Man, his face after that first session was a whole ass mood. You could see it written all over him. I did not sign up for this shit. He's under immense pressure to prove himself, knowing full well that his seat isn't exactly the most secure one on the grid. The last thing he needed was a rough first outing, but oh boy, did the universe have other plans. First off, the front wing flex on his car was way too obvious. So much so that it probably gave the FIA a mild aneurysm. On top of that, he was the only one who managed to completely lose control in the morning session, making him an instant target for every armchair critic on the internet. Sure, he did clock the second fastest lap in that session, but let's be real. That means absolutely nothing when the entire point of testing is consistency, tire management, and long-run pace. And on that front, he struggled. A lot. His biggest headache? The medium tires. He fought them like they owed him money and never quite found a setup that worked. And if that wasn't bad enough, Sam Collins threw some extra salt on the wound, suggesting that Red Bull's rivals will be salivating over the footage of Lawson's spin. Why? Because of the Flow-vis paint splattered all over the side pod of car number 30, which basically turned his mistake into a free aerodynamics lesson for every other team. Collins put it bluntly. Right now, there are at least 9 teams back in their factories. Hell, maybe even 10 now that we've got a new one joining next season, all frantically screenshotting that footage of Lawson spinning out. Translation: Red Bull just served up some free intel on a silver platter, and the rest of the grid is feasting. Red Bull's not-so-secret secrets. When your rivals get a free aerodynamics lesson. If there's one thing Red Bull hates, besides slow pit stops and porpoising, it's when the whole damn paddock gets a front-row seat to their Flow-vis paint extravaganza. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Thanks to some crystal-clear footage straight from the pit lane, every team on the grid just got a free peek at how Red Bull's airflow really works. And let me tell you, teams hate that shit. It's like leaving your browser history open for the competition to analyze. See, in the secretive world of Formula One aerodynamics, flow visualization paint is like an X-ray into a car's deepest, most intimate secrets. The kind of intel that rivals would normally sell a kidney to get their hands on. But instead, Red Bull just put on an accidental public exhibition, and you can bet every engineer from Mercedes to McLaren was furiously screenshotting that footage like their lives depended on it. But wait, Horner says everything is fine. Now, while the casual fan might look at these cars and think, looks about the same as last year, Horner is standing firm. This baby is actually packing some serious improvements. According to him, the whole grid has started looking weirdly similar under these regulations, with only Ferrari really standing out as a clear exception. But, and this is a big but, he swears that while the RB21 might look like a carbon copy of its predecessor, it's actually a sneaky little evolution with subtle yet crucial tweaks under the surface. Here's what Horner had to say. At this stage of the regulations, it's obvious that cars are converging in design. They all look pretty damn similar. I'd say Ferrari is the most visibly different, but every season, teams find these tiny, incremental performance gains. Every surface on our car is different from last year's. It just looks the same because the overall concept is still there. But if you take a closer look, you'll notice that other teams are moving towards the same ideas we've had. We had a solid winter, prepped well, and while this car may not visibly scream revolution, trust me, there's a lot happening beneath the skin. Basically, this season is all about evolution, not revolution. The goal? Marginal gains. Red Bull isn't banking on some mind-blowing, game-changing design. It's a season-long war of attrition from Melbourne to Abu Dhabi. A slow but relentless push for every single scrap of performance. What's actually new? Well, it's subtle, but it's there. One of the most obvious updates can be spotted around the engine cover and side pod region, particularly at the base of the engine cover, a clear departure from what the team introduced in Hungary last season. And let's not forget why that specific upgrade was introduced in the first place. It wasn't just some aesthetic change, it was a high downforce package designed to fine-tune the car's heat management. See, when you're battling for championships, every single decision about cooling and aerodynamics has to be justified down to the last millisecond. Red Bull's engineers, led by Pierre Weiss, have been walking a tightrope, trying to squeeze every last drop of potential out of the RB21 without compromising Honda's power unit reliability. Because the last thing they need is a rocket-fast car that overheats and dies halfway through the race. And how do you check if all those tweaks are actually working? With gallons of Flow-vis paint, of course. The morning session with Lawson saw the RB21 drenched in the stuff, confirming that Red Bull is still deep in the data collection phase. Now, let's talk about that spicy front wing controversy. Ah yes, the drama magnet that is Red Bull's front wing. We've seen teams pull some sketchy moves in the past, but here's where things get extra juicy. For the first 8 rounds of the season, teams are expected to run a more flexible front wing before gradually shifting to a more refined, stiffer version by summer. But here's the kicker. Red Bull, along with a few other clever bastards on the grid, might be pushing that whole flexibility concept to the absolute limit. Why? Because the FIA's stance on this issue has been about as consistent as a Wi-Fi signal in the Monaco tunnel. Sometimes they crack down, sometimes they turn a blind eye. It's the classic hot and cold approach from the governing body, and teams like Red Bull are more than happy to exploit every single loophole while they still can. So, are we looking at another bendy wing controversy? Maybe. One thing's for sure, Red Bull isn't afraid to play in the gray areas of the rulebook. And with the FIA's unpredictability, this could be yet another season where technical directives start flying around like angry bees, forcing teams to constantly readjust. Bottom line, Red Bull might have shown a bit more of their hand than they wanted on day one, but don't for a second think they're out of tricks. This season is going to be one long-ass chess match, and knowing them, they've already got a dozen sneaky moves lined up.